Hello and welcome back to Silent Husband Club. We know it's been a while since our last story, but we're back and aiming to bring you new, gripping tales every single day. One overheard conversation can change everything. I came to my wife's boss's lavish party expecting boring small talk and fake smiles. Instead, I stumbled upon a secret one so poisonous it could destroy careers or ruin lives. If you enjoy intense, twist-filled stories, make sure to subscribe, hit the like button, and leave a comment so you never miss the next big reveal. I'll ruin him. The words slipped through my teeth before I even realized I'd said them, my knuckles bone-white around a crystal tumbler. I stood frozen in the shadowed hallway of Windmere Estate, just outside Victor Langston's mahogany-paneled office. Through the barely cracked door, my wife's voice trembled, fighting back tears, while that smug bastard laughed. 2 hours earlier, I'd been ready to call it a night, exhausted from the endless swirl of corporate pleasantries and the hollow chatter that passed for conversation in Victor's world. Claire's world, too, in a way. My wife, Claire Cole, was the marketing director at Stratus Global. I was just the husband tagging along, a chief structural engineer at Ironclad Engineering, the man who made sure skyscrapers stayed standing when the ground shook. My world was steel, concrete, and math. Hers, quicksand and mirrors. You should come, she had insisted 3 weeks earlier, her eyes glowing with the kind of excitement I'd seen too rarely lately. Victor's summer parties are legendary. And he specifically asked if you'd be there. I had raised an eyebrow. The same Victor who made you redo the entire Q3 campaign because he didn't feel it after you'd already presented it to the board. Claire sighed, setting her wineglass down on our kitchen counter. That's business, Ethan. Besides, I've been working on something big. Really big. I think he's finally going to announce my promotion to Vice President of Marketing. I knew what that meant to her. For years of 60-hour weeks. Missed anniversaries. Her phone within reach even in bed, in case something urgent came up. She fought for this. If showing up at some overblown corporate gala helped her, I could endure an evening of egos and expensive suits. The night of the party, Windmere Estate didn't disappoint if you measured success in arrogance. A modernist glass and steel monument to wealth, it screamed, "Look how much money I have, not welcome to my home." I couldn't stop my mind from running the math, load-bearing ratios, fire evacuation routes. This place would be a nightmare in a fire, I muttered as we pulled into a driveway lined with cars that cost more than my house. Claire shot me a look. Tonight, you're not an engineer. You're my charming husband. I kissed her cheek. Professional assessment mode deactivated. The valet opened her door, and Claire stepped out in an emerald cocktail dress that made her look like she could command any room. I saw her straighten her shoulders, take one deep breath, then put on her corporate smile, that subtle transformation before she stepped into the battlefield. It always made my chest ache. Inside, the place buzzed with money and ambition. Claire whispered that Victor was bringing in the London team tonight. "This is huge," she said, adjusting my tie. I told her I was always nice. She reminded me of the last time I told someone their new home addition would collapse in a stiff wind. Fair point. Then Victor himself appeared. Tailored suit, silver hairstyle to look carelessly perfect, the kind of man who probably spent more on haircuts than I did on my mortgage. "Claire, my star," he boomed, air-kissing her cheeks. He turned to me, shaking my hand with calculated dominance. "Ethan, so glad you could make it. Claire tells me you're building the new Riverside Tower." "Designing it," I corrected. He barely pretended to care before sweeping Claire into the crowd, leaving me with the bar. That's where I met Naomi Park, legal department, sharp-eyed and sharper-tongued. She nodded toward Victor, who was already touching the small of a young associate's back. "4 times tonight so far," she said. Then her tone shifted. "Your wife's in marketing, right? Big London strategy? Watch out for her. Victor's notorious for taking credit for women's work." I laughed it off at first. But somewhere, deep down, the first cracks of unease began to form. 2 hours later, after more conversations about golf than any man who has never held a club should be subjected to, I was on the verge of slipping out. Claire was still working the room, her smile flawless, her posture a study in confidence. I sent her a quick text, "Going to get some air. Back in a few." Out on the back terrace, the cool night air hit me like a reset button. I loosened my tie, inhaled deeply, and seriously considered calling a ride home. That's when I heard the voices, sharp, low, coming from just around the corner. "You can't do this, Victor. It's my work. My research. My strategy." Claire's voice tight, trembling with anger, yet holding firm. "Your work," Victor replied, his tone dripping with condescension, "developed on company time, with company resources. Don't be naive, Claire. This is business." I moved closer, careful to stay in the shadows, until I found myself hidden behind a massive potted plant near a window that looked into Victor's home office. Claire stood rigid, arms crossed, while Victor lounged against his desk with an ease that made my blood boil. She told him she'd spent 8 months developing the Horizon Initiative, late nights, weekends, sacrificing personal life, and he cut her off with a smug smile, explaining that the London partners didn't need all the details. The project needed a face, and as CEO, that face was his. "You're taking credit for everything," she said, her voice shaking but clear. "The influencer network, the engagement metrics, the digital transformation plan, all of it." Victor's mask slipped for just a second, his eyes cold. "Careful, Claire. Stratus has been good to you. I've been good to you. You have a nice little fixer-upper, don't you? That special bonus last year, do you really want the board to think you're ungrateful?" The implication was poison, and I could feel my fists clench at my sides. That so-called bonus had been for salvaging a campaign his own nephew nearly destroyed. Now he was using it like a leash. Claire asked him point-blank if he was threatening her. His laugh was the kind that could curdle blood. "Threatening? No. Just explaining how the game is played. You're good, but you're not irreplaceable." When she pushed back, demanding better terms, he generously offered her a raise and a co-lead role with Andrew Blake, the board member's son who barely knew how to open a marketing brief. And when she insisted on having it in writing, he agreed, placing a hand on her shoulder and letting it slide down her arm with a deliberate slowness that made my skin crawl. "This is how you advance, Claire. Play the game. Be patient. Your time will come." She stepped back, her professional smile snapping into place like armor, but before she could leave, Victor poured them each a glass of overpriced scotch and told her to redo the demographic targeting because London wanted a premium focus. She argued the data was solid, that the growth was in the mid-tier market, but he waved it off. "Make the changes. It's not too much to ask, especially given our arrangement." That last word was loaded enough to set every alarm bell in my head ringing. Claire's voice turned cold, and she agreed only to review the data. I had heard enough. Every instinct in me screamed to burst in there and break his smug face, but that would destroy her career in an instant. No. This required patience. Strategy. I would dismantle him the way I would dismantle a failing structure, find the weak points, apply pressure, and watch it collapse. I slipped back into the party and found Naomi Park, still holding her martini near the food table. I told her quietly what I had overheard. She didn't look surprised. "Classic Victor," she said. "Token recognition, fake promises, and the credit goes to him. He's done it at least 5 times that I know of. If Claire has documentation, she let the thought hang, then pressed a business card into my hand. Tell her to call me. And Ethan, be careful. Victor has powerful friends. When I finally found Claire again, her professional mask was flawless, but I could see the tension in her shoulders, the stiffness in her smile. I didn't say anything, not yet. But I knew one thing: Victor Langston had just declared war, and I had no intention of losing. The drive home was quiet, the kind of silence that hums with unspoken words. I waited until we were in our bedroom, door closed, before I finally said it. I heard you and Victor talking in his office. Claire froze mid-motion, one earring still in her hand. You were eavesdropping? She asked, her voice sharp but tired. I stepped outside for air and happened to overhear, I said. He's stealing your work, Claire. And the way he spoke to you, telling you what to wear, that's harassment. She gave a short, bitter laugh. Welcome to corporate America, Ethan. You think this is the first time this has happened to me? At least Victor's offering something in return. My first boss took credit for my campaigns and gave me nothing but a pat on the back. I sat beside her, taking her hand. It's still wrong. We can fight this. But she shook her head. How? He wasn't lying about the board, they're his friends, allies. It's my word against his. And you know exactly who they believe, the man who's made them millions for a decade, or the woman who's been here 4 years. I leaned forward. Then we get evidence. Documentation. Emails. Something that proves this is your work. She was quiet for a long moment, her gaze searching mine, then she squeezed my hand. I appreciate the righteous anger. Really. But this is my career, my fight. I've accepted his terms for now because it's the smartest play. 20% raise, VP in 6 months. If he doesn't follow through, then I'll reevaluate. For now, I want to drop it. I let it go out loud, but not in my mind. The next morning, while she showered, I opened her work laptop. She hadn't logged out of her email, a rare slip for her, a sign of just how rattled she'd been. What I found made my blood run cold: months of messages between Claire and her team, shaping the Horizon Initiative from concept to final draft, all with her fingerprints on them, her edits, her notes, her creative vision. And more recently, versions with Victor's name as primary author, replacing hers entirely. The smoking gun was an email from Into IT, restrict Claire Cole's editing privileges to comment only on the executive summary and strategy overview. Dated 3 days ago, right after she delivered the completed strategy to him. You knew I'd look, I said when I heard her behind me. She walked over, hair damp from the shower, and smiled faintly. That's why I left it open. I wanted you to see what I'm dealing with. She clicked into another folder labeled Insurance, backups of every draft, every email, every research document, all stored on her personal cloud. I'm not naive, Ethan. I've been documenting everything from day one. I just haven't decided what to do with it yet. I told her about Naomi Park, the legal contact, and how she hinted Victor had a history of this. Claire's brow furrowed. Naomi's sharp, but going to legal is risky. If Victor finds out, I cut her off. We don't have to decide today. But now we know we have options. Over the next week, Claire played the perfect corporate soldier at work, making the demographic edits Victor wanted while quietly adding to her evidence pile. I reached out to Karen Holt, an old college friend who now specialized in employment law. She didn't sugarcoat it. Claire has a strong case for intellectual property theft, maybe harassment too, but corporate cases are messy, expensive, and they follow you. Even if she wins, she might get blacklisted in the industry. The best route? Find leverage that forces them to make it right without a public fight. Leverage. That was something I understood intimately. In engineering, leverage is all about applying force at just the right point to move something far bigger than yourself. Claire met Naomi for lunch and came home with something valuable. Victor had pulled this before multiple times, and the company had quietly settled each case. But more importantly, she learned that Eleanor Stratton, the CEO of Stratus Global's London partner, had zero tolerance for this kind of behavior. Eleanor once ousted her own brother-in-law for taking credit for a female colleague's work. If she knew what Victor was doing to Claire, well, that could be our pressure point. The opportunity arrived sooner than either of us expected. One Friday evening, Claire came home, heels in hand, eyes blazing. The London team is flying in Monday. Victor's called an all-hands meeting to unveil the Horizon initiative. He wants me standing next to him, smiling and silent while he presents my work. And guess what? Andrew Blake is suddenly listed as a key contributor. My jaw tightened. Who else will be in the room? She listed them off: the London executives, the full marketing department, the board, and even some industry press. A plan began to take shape in my mind. I asked her about Victor's presentation habits. She told me he always used his tablet, pretending to speak off the cuff while discreetly glancing at it. Why? She asked, suspicious. Just curious, I lied. And who controls the main display? IT sets it up, but Victor advances the slides himself. I smiled, the kind of smile that meant trouble. I might have an idea. She narrowed her eyes. Ethan, be careful. This is my career on the line. I nodded. Trust me. That night, I called Daniel Cho, an old friend, an IT security genius, and someone who still owed me a favor for designing his dream home. When I told him what I needed, he didn't hesitate. This will work, he said, his voice almost too confident. Daniel came over Saturday night with a small black case and the kind of grin that said he'd been waiting his whole life for someone to ask for this favor. Inside was a burner phone preloaded with an app disguised as a harmless system update. This is a remote backdoor into Victor's presentation tablet, he explained, his voice low but brimming with pride. It doesn't steal data, doesn't break anything permanent. But at the right moment, it'll jump to a specific slide, in this case, the one showing the document properties with Claire's name as the original author. 30 seconds later, the system freezes completely. Long enough to cause panic, not long enough to draw a full forensic audit. Claire listened intently, her fingers drumming on the table. And then? Daniel grinned. Then you step in with your original presentation, of course. She nodded slowly, a spark in her eyes I hadn't seen in weeks. The rest of the weekend was a blur of careful preparation. Claire refined her slides, restoring every element Victor had watered down or deleted. She discreetly reached out to a few trusted colleagues, Melissa Graves from Data Analytics, who had timestamps for all her work, and Michael from Design, who still had the original mock-ups with her notes. You've built quite the resistance movement, I told her, and she smiled. I learned from the best. You've been fighting for me since day one. Now it's my turn. But later that night, I found her at 3 a.m., sitting in our home office in her robe, scrolling through her presentation for what must have been the 100th time. What if it backfires? What if I end up looking like a fool? She whispered. I knelt beside her chair. You won't. You know this material because you created it. Victor's just a man reading lines you wrote. You're the architect. She took a deep breath and nodded. Then let's do this. Monday morning, Claire dressed with deliberate precision, a sharp charcoal suit instead of the blue dress Victor had suggested, red lipstick like a battle flag. Nervous? I asked. Terrified, she admitted, but ready. I promised her she'd be amazing and told her to call me the second it was over. I wasn't supposed to be part of the meeting, but by mid-morning, I couldn't sit still. I drove to Stratus Global and parked across the street, close enough to feel the tension radiating from the building. At 11 o'clock, she texted, "It's happening. Wish me luck." I sent back a heart emoji and stared at the burner phone. At 11:28, another text, "He's starting the strategy overview." My thumb hovered over the trigger. One deep breath, then I pressed it. For 2 agonizing minutes, nothing happened. My stomach knotted. Had the whole plan just failed? Then my phone buzzed again. It worked. Tablet glitched. Slide showed my name. Victor's panicking. I'm stepping in. 30 of the longest minutes of my life passed before my phone rang. "Get in here," Claire said breathlessly. "Main conference room. You have to see this." When I walked in, the room was chaos. Executives whispering urgently in corners, IT staff swarming the AV setup, and in the center, Claire, speaking with an elegant older woman in a tailored navy suit. Claire waved me over. "Ethan, this is Eleanor Stratton, CEO of Stratton International." Eleanor shook my hand firmly. "Your wife is remarkable, Mr. Cole." It's not often a presentation goes so spectacularly off script. Claire's eyes were electric. "It worked," she whispered to me. It actually worked. She told me the chain of events in a low rush, how Victor's tablet had jumped to the metadata slide, how he'd fumbled and frozen, and how she'd stepped forward with her backup presentation, delivering every detail with the authority of the person who'd built it from the ground up. She'd fielded questions Victor couldn't answer, and one by one, her team members had stepped in to back her up, Melissa with the data models, Michael with the original designs, and even Andrew Blake, admitting publicly that his name had been added last week without his input. Eleanor had watched the entire display, her expression unreadable until she asked to speak to the actual architect of this strategy in private. Victor, pale and cornered, had been asked to excuse them. When the conference room doors finally opened again, Victor emerged looking like a man who'd just survived a slow-motion implosion. He made a beeline for us, eyes burning. "You engineered this," he hissed at me. "You think you're clever with your little tech trick? This isn't over." I stepped closer, my voice calm. "The only thing I've engineered lately is the Riverside Tower. Claire engineered your downfall herself." She stepped up beside me, her gaze locked on his. "No, Victor. You had no idea who you were dealing with. That was your mistake." Someone called his name from across the room, and with a twitch in his jaw, he turned and walked away. Minutes after Victor stalked off, a board member approached, his expression unreadable but his tone formal. "Miss Cole, the board would like to speak with you privately." Claire gave my hand a quick squeeze before disappearing into the boardroom. I paced the floor, resisting the urge to barge in. Naomi Park appeared at my elbow, her lips curling into a knowing smile. "Quite the show," she murmured. I counted at least 3 potential lawsuits Victor opened himself up to in the last hour alone. If the board is smart, they'll cut him loose and promote your wife. I arched an eyebrow. "And if they're not smart?" She smirked. "Then I'll be very busy, and they'll be very broke." 20 minutes later, Claire emerged, her face composed but her eyes alight with barely contained triumph. As soon as the elevator doors closed behind us, she let the smile break free. "Effective immediately, Victor is on indefinite leave. I've been named interim vice president of marketing, with a formal review in 3 months for the permanent position." I lifted her off her feet in a hug, her laughter muffled against my shoulder. "That's not all," she added. They're launching an internal investigation into his management practices. Apparently, I'm not the only one with a story to tell. By the time we stepped out of the elevator into the lobby, her phone buzzed with a text. She glanced at it and laughed. Melissa says Victor just tried to get into his office. Security deactivated his key card. He made a scene, started throwing things, and had to be escorted out. I shook my head. Classic Victor, blame everyone else on the way down. She grew quiet for a moment, her eyes softening as she looked at me. Thank you for not letting me settle, Ethan. For pushing me to fight back. I squeezed her hand. Always. But if this is what happens when I leave parties early, I might never stay until the end again. Her laugh rang out bright, free, and unburdened. The fallout was swift. Within a week, Victor had resigned to pursue other opportunities, the board's polished phrase for disgrace. 2 of his closest allies announced early retirements. Naomi was promoted to senior legal counsel, tasked with implementing a new anonymous reporting system for workplace misconduct. Claire and I celebrated over dinner, but halfway through, she had her laptop open, papers spread across the table, already sketching out a new implementation plan for the Horizon Initiative. She looked up at me, her eyes shining with something I hadn't seen in years, unfiltered excitement about her work. For the first time, I'm building something that's truly mine, she said. Do you know what that feels like? I smiled. Yeah. I do. 6 months later, I ran into Victor at a coffee shop downtown. He looked smaller. The custom suits and polished swagger were gone, replaced by an off-the-rack jacket and a slouched posture. He avoided my eyes, grabbed his drink, and left quickly. Later I heard he'd landed a mid-level position at a smaller competitor, no corner office, no authority to steal anyone's work, just another desk in a row. The most surprising development came 2 weeks after the presentation, when Andrew Blake showed up in Claire's new corner office to apologize. I've been pressured into playing along with these schemes before, he admitted. I'm done with it. I want to learn how to do the work for real. I want to work on your team. Claire was cautious but intrigued. Everyone deserves a chance to redefine themselves, she told me later. And having a board member's son on my side could be useful. 3 months ahead of schedule, Claire's team celebrated her permanent appointment as vice president. At the party, Melissa pulled me aside. We've all wanted to stand up to Victor for years, she confessed. Nobody had the evidence or the courage. Claire had both. I glanced across the room at my wife laughing, confident, completely in her element, and felt a quiet pride settle in my chest. She hadn't just won. She'd changed the rules. The ripple effect of Victor's downfall spread far beyond Stratus Global. 2 months later, Claire was invited to speak at a women's leadership conference about protecting intellectual property in the workplace. She never mentioned Victor by name, but her message was razor-sharp: document everything, build allies, and never accept theft as just the way the game is played. Her session had the highest attendance of the entire event, and the applause was deafening. 14 months after that fateful presentation, the Horizon Initiative had exceeded every projection, and Eleanor Stratton made Claire an offer she couldn't ignore to lead the North American division of Stratton International, a promotion in both power and pay. We talked it through over a bottle of wine, weighing what she'd built at Stratus against what she could create next. In the end, her answer was simple. Stratus was where I learned to fight, she said. Stratton is where I'll learn to lead. On her last day, her team gave her a framed copy of the original Horizon Initiative strategy document, metadata and all, showing her as the author. So you never forget who built this, Melissa said with a smile. It hangs now in her new office, not just a memento of a project, but a monument to a battle won and the resilience it took to win it. We knew Victor's fall wouldn't change corporate culture overnight. There would always be other victors, other stolen ideas, other impossible choices. But Claire had proved something vital. When you hold your ground and refuse to be erased, you can shake even the most unshakable foundations. That night, we celebrated our back porch with champagne, the summer air warm and still. Her phone buzzed with congratulations from colleagues and friends. The last message was from Daniel. Check Victor's LinkedIn. You're welcome. We pulled it up together. His profile now read, exploring new opportunities after 12 successful years at Stratus Global. Claire laughed, the sound rich and free. That's corporate speak for fired in disgrace. I raised my glass. I hope his next opportunity comes with a pay cut and no window. She clinked her glass against mine. To new opportunities, mine, not his. As the night deepened, I studied her face in the soft light. There's a concept in engineering called structural integrity, the ability of something to withstand its intended load without failing. That day in the conference room, Claire hadn't just kept her integrity intact, she'd shown the world exactly how much weight she could bear. And Victor Langston? He learned the hard way that some structures aren't designed to break. No matter how much pressure you apply, some only grow stronger.
Thank you for watching. If this story touched you, shocked you, or simply made you think, don't keep it to yourself. Leave a comment, your thoughts, your story, your truth. Subscribe for more raw, real, and unforgettable confessions. And if this story made you feel seen, share it. Someone else might need to hear it too. You're not alone here. This channel is a safe space for those who've been betrayed, broken, and rebuilt.